Yo, what's going on, guys? It is Fox98 here. Welcome back to a brand new video and another F1 debate for you guys today here on the channel. Today, we're going to be reviewing the F1 2023 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And as you can tell, probably by my facial expressions, I don't really have much to say on the matter of this Grand Prix. Apart from it was awful. Let's get straight into it. Let's break it all down because what I don't want to do is tangent off into a massive rant that goes on for like an hour and a half, which is completely irrelevant. We're going to try and make things more constructive rather than just ranting about it all of the time. That's going to be the aim, and we'll see if we can attempt to do that. If we can't, well, then it's not my fault. Blame Formula 1 for doing that. So, heading into the Azerbaijan Grand Prix weekend, first things first, we had the change of formats. We were decided, or the FIA and the Formula 1 teams agreed together to change the format of the sprints to try and make things more exciting and bring more action to the sport. They decided to opt with FP1 on a Friday, followed by qualifying for the main Grand Prix on the Friday evening. Then on the Saturday, we had the sprint in the morning, the sprint qualifying in the morning, followed by the sprint in the afternoon, and then we had the main Grand Prix throughout the course of the Sunday. I'm just going to put this straight out here, and I'm putting my own personal opinion into this. I don't ever want to see a sprint race ever again. I just think they're pointless, they're awful, and I get more satisfaction out of practice. And I'm just saying that right now. I really do. And I'm not saying that in a way to be like, constructive in terms of, oh yeah, I'd rather just watch practice than this, to try and make myself and my point look silly. I'm going to genuinely explain why I prefer practice over these sprint qualies and sprint races, and I just can't stand them, basically. And it didn't even work. I thought the Azerbaijan Grand Prix sprint, well, even the race itself, but the sprint was also an absolute snooze fest, and so was the race. But let's talk about that, though. So, practice one itself is fine, and there was no problem with that. You know, it was a crazy session, couple of incidents, couple of red flags, couple of engine failures, things like that, and it was quite, quite interesting. It was heavily rushed because the teams only had the 1 hour to do anything with their car. This is where I've got the big problem. And I understand that what people are trying to say in terms of, yeah, but if a team turns up to a circuit and gets the setup in the right window straight away, you know, that's on the other teams not getting it right. But all of a sudden then, for the rest of the weekend, for every single session then, for 2 races and 2 qualifying sessions, they are completely stuck with what they've got. And there's no way that they can fine-tune this. And I thought Karun Chandok made a great point about this, because he mentions that they need to be, if they're going to do this format for the next one, which I think is Austria, I could be wrong, they really need to be more lenient on the Parc Ferme rules going into the sprints, you know, into FP1 and qualifying, from basically up until the Grand Prix, in my opinion, be a bit more lenient on Parc Ferme rules. Now, obviously, for the actual race itself, obviously, you know, everything's set in stone. That's absolutely fine. I've got no problem with that. But it just, you know, the fact is, like Carlos Sainz, for example, he really struggled in the Grand Prix. And that's not quite fair on him because he's only had 1 session to get it right. You know, it was a difficult one for him. You know, he struggled to get it right. And in some occasions, you do. You know, Hamilton struggled, you know, a lot in the race. And he said, you know, before the Grand Prix, he knows where the problems are with his car, but they can't change them. So was the Mercedes technically maybe a bit faster? Could Sainz have maybe challenged a little bit more, you know? We just don't know. We don't get that information. Whereas I feel like, you know, if they were a bit more lenient to the Parc Ferme rules, it could potentially just allow a couple more setup tweaks in there, just to maybe, you know, bring either, it could potentially spread more cars out, you never know, but it could also bring cars in a bit closer to how we would potentially like it. Obviously not to the Red Bulls, but, you know, to everybody else. So we obviously had the FP1, then we had the qualifying for the main race. This is where I feel things are a little bit too confusing, in my opinion, now, where I think things need to change. I think the problem that I've got with having qualifying on the Friday for the main race is it gets a little bit confusing because you've got qualifying and then the next session that we all see as spectators is qualifying again. And it's just confusing. I don't quite know why we need to have qualifying and then qualifying. For me, I think the Friday evening should be the sprint qualifying, because the issue that we've got now, so for in terms of UK times, on the Friday, the qualifying for the Grand Prix itself was at 2 p.m. UK time. Now, the problem with that is nobody around in the UK that has a full-time job. People like myself, like I was working and qualifying was going on. Normally I do like to tune into practice, but the good thing about having practice on a Friday is if you miss it, it's not really the end of the world. And if you're somebody that wants to catch up on it, by all means, you can go ahead and catch up on it. Sometimes like I do. But the thing is when you've got qualifying for the Sunday Grand Prix, and you're in work, you can't watch it, and it's pointless for me. Whereas if you were doing, say, qualifying for the sprint on the Saturday, that's kind of, for me, a less important qualifying session. One that we don't really, if we miss it, it's like, well, at least it's only for the sprint. It's not the main thing. And I feel like they need to put that forwards to then have the sprint race in the morning, and then what you've done is you've got rid of the sprint. You've got your practice session, you've got your bulk of sprint stuff, you've then got qualifying for the main race then in the afternoon, and then you've also got the race then, and you've got that bulk then for the main Grand Prix. So we've completed the practice era, should we say, of the weekend. We've now done the sprint race era of the weekend. Now we move into the main race of, the era, should we say. I don't know. That's what I would personally do. But I wouldn't even do that. I genuinely believe that it's time that we I don't even know why, but just scrap the whole thing. Like, it's just not fun. I don't actually think we've had a sprint race which has shown why we need sprint races, if that makes sense. I think if we go back to when we had our first ever sprint race in Silverstone 2021, we had a little bit of a decent duel between Hamilton and Verstappen off the line. Apart from that, I genuinely cannot remember anything else from that sprint. We go to Monza, which I remember was another sprint, and we had Gasly going into the wall. We had Hamilton having a poor start, and I think Bottas won it, and Verstappen was second, like Ricciardo was third or something like that. Cool, okay, but nothing else that I can remember in that sprint happened. And then in Brazil, 2021, probably the best sprint that we've actually witnessed. And that's thanks to Hamilton, because he started last. He fell all his way up to P5 with some fabulous overtakes. Norris even made a great overtake on Leclerc. And yeah, that was a good sprint. I enjoyed it at Interlagos. That was good. 2022, Austria's sprint, I genuinely cannot remember anything from it. I think Verstappen won it quite convincingly. The Ferraris were like, yeah, we'll get him. And they did. I don't even know what the other sprint was in 2022. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I've forgotten. And then obviously Interlagos, which was also another sprint race for 2022. And that was actually, again, it was another decent one it was Imola was the first sprint. There we go. Take me about 20 minutes just to figure it out. And again, that was pointless apart from Verstappen passing Leclerc, but Verstappen was quicker than Leclerc anyway. So it was probably, and I think that's the only battle for the lead we've had in the sprint. Oh no, Brazil was as well. And then obviously this year, we've had Azerbaijan. And you think, oh, hang on a minute, this could be a proper sprint, this one. But it's not, and it doesn't work. The problem is we've got teams and drivers on the same tyre compounds that can go to the end of the race, a bit of management here and there, but they can go to the end of the race. They're on the same fuel loads. There's no strategy that can come into play here. If the safety car comes out like it did at the start of the race, we've lost like 3 or 4 laps already, and then all of a sudden we've got a 12-lap sprint rather than the 17-lap sprint, and it just doesn't work. The thing about the FP1, 2, and 3 and quality in the race, genuinely, I mean this now, is on the Thursday, we start to build up a little bit. We get the press conferences in there, and we start to hear a bit about the drivers and their thoughts going into the weekend. And it just gives you a little bit of that energy and a reminder, F1's coming this weekend. Friday then, we've got the practice session, and it's great. We see teams trialing out maybe some new upgrades, testing out different specifications, an FP1 doing some setup work, seeing who's struggling, who's not. Then you go to FP2 and you see some simulation work, and that builds you up quite well for the weekend. You've got that quality simulation run, you're thinking, hang on a minute, that Aston Martin is quick. Then you go into the long run pace and you're thinking, okay, McLaren are there with Alpine, for an example, and a Ferrari are getting a little bit closer to Aston than what we potentially thought. And it's quite exciting. And then all of a sudden you're thinking, I want to get into the rest of the weekend now. I'm looking forward to it. This is quite interesting. Then we go into Saturday, and then you get the qualifying build-up, basically. And you're thinking, this is great. if you're a Red Bull fan, yeah, look at that, Max has just put in a lap that's 2/10 quicker than what Perez has done, and Perez is half a second quicker than Leclerc. Or, you know, you're thinking as a Mercedes fan, oh my God, you know, Hamilton, he's really struggling in this at the moment. Can we sort this out before qualifying? And, you know, there's so many questions that you want asked and answered, and it just builds you up. And then you've got qualifying, then you've got the race, and you've got a properly fine-tuned car, and you've got the weekend. The main event is the race. The problem is we're forcing action to us when, theoretically, we don't need it. You're overhyping stuff that just isn't fun, and it's not entertaining. I've gone on for 10 minutes or so by looking at my recording of ranting about sprints. I'm going to stop there. I just want to get rid of them. I really just cannot stand them. I hate them, and I probably won't watch a sprint race again, to be honest. I don't want to. It's just depressing to say it. You know, I'm somebody that, you know, when it came to like the Bahrain practice sessions, for example, when it was the first practice of the season, I watched all of them because I was so excited. But sprints, I've just not been convinced. And even the format changed hasn't convinced me. But anyway, let's get that out of the way. Let's stop ranting about sprint, shall we? Let's rant about the race itself, because that was just as bad. Okay, let's get into it. Qualifying, we saw an upturn in fortune for Ferrari, which was good to see. They had fantastic straight line speed, and it was effective without the DRS being deployed. And they had very good battery deployment. I mean, we've seen... It was something that I didn't predict, but, you know, it was something that was on my mind heading into this weekend. Ferrari said that they did a lot of work to try and reduce the straight line speed deficit to Red Bull. And that hasn't been apparent because the Red Bull has been able to basically have less downforce on their car, but still, less rear wing on their car, but still produce the same downforce levels. And they've just got such great aero efficiency. But here, when everybody's running with a low rear wing, Ferrari genuinely do have good straight line speed. It's good to see. They had a great qualifying session with Leclerc, obviously taking pole in the 2 races, actually. So that's good for Leclerc. And, you know, we thought we could potentially see something. But, again, another thing about the sprint race is it was a spoiler for what was going to happen in the main event. And this is another thing that kind of just turns me... I can't stop going back to sprints. I can't stop going back to them. Unfortunately, it is a bit of a spoiler. You know, we saw in the Grand Prix, obviously Verstappen had damage to Russell at the start, but the problem was because Leclerc got passed by Perez quite very easily, and then it was just being managed all that point. You kind of knew that in the main event, there was nothing that was going to stop Red Bull. And, you know, when you go into the Sunday Grand Prix, at least if you didn't have that sprint in there, you'd kind of, again, and this is what I mean going back to hype, you'd be excited because you don't know. Whereas we know, because the sprint happened and the Red Bulls were way quicker. And it's just a simple fact. So, yeah. Also then, moving backwards a little bit now, going into those 2 qualifying sessions. What was my thoughts on the original qualifying versus the sprint qualifying? Nothing really too different, to be honest. The only thing I really didn't like about the sprint qualifying was the rule about having a brand new set of softs in Q3, because Lando Norris got into Q3 but wasn't allowed to participate because he didn't have a fresh set of softs. I just find that pathetic. Like, just give every single driver a set of soft tyres for Q3. Like, honestly, they do it for the main Grand Prix itself, you know, the main qualifying session. Just do it in the sprint quali, or even just make them have to use a set of scrub tyres or something. I don't know. I just found it an absolute joke, to be honest. Also, I didn't like the shorter qualifying times. Was not very good for Q3. Now, it's obviously going to be different because Azerbaijan is a track where you lap in the 1 minute 40s, and, you know, and your cool down laps are like 3 minutes or so. Everybody got 2 runs in, but the fact that they couldn't go to the garage, get a fresh set of boots on and go out again, it just meant that the second run that everybody did was completely useless. Some drivers improved, don't get me wrong, but there was also quite a few that basically didn't improve, and it was a little bit anticlimactic in that circumstance. So I personally changed that. In the sprint then, we had 18 on-track overtakes. Not too bad. In the main Grand Prix itself, we had 13 on-track overtakes. Yeah, this is becoming a problem. So why was it a problem? Why did we struggle to see drivers overtake? And you'll probably notice throughout the course of this video, you already realised by now, is I'm not really trying to go in order of what happened in each of the Grand Prix and each of the sessions, because I'll be blunt with you, I don't really care because nothing happened, apart from the end, which we'll speak about. But why did we struggle to get, well, overtaking done? Now, the first thing that, again, I think Crew and Chandok, by the way, obviously no one from Sky or anyone around ever sees these videos, but shout out to Crew and Chandok, by the way, on commentary. So I watched Sky F1, which, in case you don't actually watch the same thing as what I was watching, but shout out to Karun for being the co-commentator for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Of course, Martin Brundle is the commentator for pretty much the whole of the season, but he's contracted to do a couple less Grand Prix. Of course, he is not this being a bit feels like being a bit offensive, but he is a little bit slightly old now, and the travelling can take his effect, and obviously if he wants to see his family, and etc. like that, it's a very grueling calendar. So being having a couple of one or two events at home, just give him a couple of weeks, to sort of sit back a little bit. It's quite nice for him. But Karun was brilliant on commentary. Really enjoyed it. Great technical insight. And worked quite well with Crofty. I think they clashed like once or twice, but then, that happens when you've not been in commentary together. But they were very, very good. And he mentioned that at the end of the day, obviously the rules and the regulations was to make the cars follow more closely. Why weren't they following as better as we've seen this year? Well, quite simple, as Karun put it. The more downforce that these cars have now had added on, the more turbulence they'll produce. And that's what's happening. It is going to get harder to follow. And in 2024, next year, there are no set regulations due to change. So it's just going to get even harder to follow. The second thing that's a problem is the DRS. Now, Formula One is trying to get away or build themselves into a position where DRS is no longer effectively around. They want to get rid of it. This race quite clearly proved that DRS is vital for overtaking still. And I understand what they've done in terms of reducing the DRS by 100 meters. But I think what they just needed to look at is do some testing, I think, because from last year to this year, things are completely different. We don't quite understand that, we are adding more downforce on. We are having more turbulence. It is harder to follow these cars. And we almost need to do some form of testing just to basically showcase, is the DRS powerful enough? And I think, sometimes you're going to get it right and sometimes you're going to get it wrong. Here, it was clear that we got it wrong. If the DRS was 100 meters, basically, if it wasn't reduced at all and we had the extra 100 meters of DRS, we would have seen plenty more overtaking. And I think that was the problem. The fact is a lot of the drivers, they were very much heavily managing on their tyres, trying to get to the end. It was a hot race weekend, being street circuit, being confined into the buildings. The heat stays. There's not a lot of breeze, and it's very difficult to keep the temperatures down. We saw a lot of times that there were drivers getting into the DRS and they just couldn't pass. I mean, look at Hulkenberg and Ocon. The two of them went till the very end of the Grand Prix before they pitted, and nobody behind them, even on fresh tyres, could pass them. Or like Hamilton, for example, he was close to Sainz down the straight and getting into that DRS section. He was about 4.3 off by the time he got into turn 1. Add the extra 100 meters and he could at least attempt to go for a pass, because in the tight and twisty corners then, in terms of the rotation, the Ferrari was quicker and he edged out about 0.9 of a second. Of course, we saw the Red Bulls breeze past Charles Leclerc. At the end of the day, the Red Bull is in a completely different league, and everybody needs to understand that right now, if you're going to beat a Red Bull on merit, you're going to need to basically break Parc Fermé rules and cheat to do it right now. Let's be real. Unless, obviously, they DNF from a Grand Prix, then that's not even merit in that sense. But they can get past anybody. The rest of the grid, though, can't. And this is where we need to be manageable on the DRS. We need to try and find a more effective way to manage testing out DRS, whether that's just the teams doing, being allocated at some point to test the DRS between themselves and another driver going, at the good speeds. I don't know, but something kind of needs to be done about that. And they're the two reasons why we just didn't get any action, and it was just so forgettable, unfortunately. There was good tyre strategies in there that could have potentially been played, but honestly, it was just a complete snooze fest. But there's one more thing we need to discuss, and that is what the hell happened at the end of the Grand Prix. I have no idea. That was genuinely the most to just wrap off what I'd already felt as a shambolic race weekend. We get whatever happened at the end, where there was photographers in the pit lane on the last lap, or the second to last lap. There was somebody even putting up one of those barrier, you know, the rope barriers that you see in an airport. I don't know what they're called. One of those conveyor belt barriers. They were trying to put it in to close the pit lane, and Ocon hadn't pitted yet. And a lot of people, they've criticised Ted Kravitz for his commentary and stuff like that. Sometimes he annoys me, but I do really like Ted Kravitz. But the fact of the matter is the problem I've got is when Ted is coming up on commentary saying Ocon needs to pit, there's photographers in the pit lane, there's people climbing towards the fences and stuff, you can genuinely hear the terror on Ted's voice because he knows that there's something that Ocon needs to pit. He knows that he's going to be coming into the pit lane, otherwise he's going to get disqualified. Everyone's all blocking the pit lane. Ocon's coming in, and he's literally millimeters away from running over everyone at that point. And I don't understand how you could not know that. Like, the premise is, and I don't understand it. Like, I get what they're doing. You know, at the end of the day, you close off that piece, you know, so then the mechanics can come forwards to wherever, you know, you're celebrating and where the podium is. But we're still racing. You know, it's a case of, it's almost like, oh, well, nobody's going to be pitting on lap 1. Everyone's going to be pitting around about lap 17, 18 or whatever. Like, how do you not understand that there are two drivers that are going to the end? That even Hulkenberg's engineer was saying, look, we're going until we see a red flag, or we're going to the end until we see a safety car, and then we will box. Because if we can't get that, we'll obviously have to pit. You know, they would have all of the screens to tell them there who's made a pit stop yet. Surely they would know. You do not come out into that pit lane, and this is the thing for me now, and I genuinely mean this. You do not come out into the pit lane until every single driver has crossed that finish line and has officially finished the Grand Prix. And if it means that Max Verstappen has, you know, is parking up to where he's won the Grand Prix and there's no barriers or whatever set by there, I do not care, because that should never happen. It is disgusting and disgraceful, and somebody really seriously could have got hurt. And do you know what's the sad thing about it? This happened last year in 2022 with Alex Albon. And the problem is with us in our human society, we get to a position whereby, unless somebody is seriously hurt / killed, we do nothing about it. Now, here's the thing. Something will probably get spoken about and addressed with regards to this. But the problem is, if this happened last year, we've not had the same impact. We've not done anything to prevent it this year. The problem we've got is, I guarantee you, this will happen again. And do you know what's going to happen? Somebody's going to get killed. We're literally going to see a live broadcast of a mechanic getting run over by a Formula 1 car. Not a mechanic, sorry, a photographer getting run over by a Formula 1 car. Do you know what's going to happen? We're going to have it announced on the news, on Sky Sports F1 or on Sky News or wherever you're watching it from around the world. Tragedy as photographer is killed by being run over by a car. You know what? You know that's what's going to be. But the problem is then, is, you know, it's so tragic, we're going to take action. This is so reactive. This is what Formula 1 does, though. You know, it's like Jules Bianchi and his crash in Japan. You know, we didn't have a virtual safety car back in 2014. So whilst he was in dark conditions, intermediate tyres when the track was actually wet, there were yellow flags around, he was going too fast and he goes straight into it and he goes straight into a tractor, dead. What happened? Oh, we'll bring out something called the virtual safety car to make people slow down on their deltas. Okay, fine, cool. We then get a bunch of crashes. Okay, right, we're going to introduce the halo now. That's also going to be something that we've been working on, thanks to, guess what? Jules Bianchi's crash. Cool. Okay, great. Oh, mechanic. You know, he's been killed by a Formula 1 car because he was in the pit lane whilst the race is still going on. Oh, we'll do something about that. No, we do it now before we lose lives. Let's not lose a life and then make changes, okay? Well, let's do it now rather than before it's costing a life and a family, a member of this planet. I think that's the right way we need to go about it. So, for me, my personal opinion, until every single car has crossed the finish line and the race is officially over and every driver is fully classified, then everybody can come out. And that's how it should be. And that's my personal opinion. And it's the same for the mechanics that come onto the pit wall to be like, yeah, woo, well done. I know they can't climb the fences, but they can get onto they can go towards the pit wall, basically. Same thing. You're not allowed to go out there. You're not allowed. That's it. Because, again, Red Bull could be crossing the finish line to win, but there could be like an Ocon that's been lapped, that's got to pit, or, you know, it needs changing. Put it that way, you know? So that's pretty much it for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. I'm really sorry, guys. I just really didn't like it, and I just wanted to voice my opinions. But that's what the F1 debate is all about. Maybe you thoroughly enjoyed it. You never know. But we've got the Miami Grand Prix coming up this week. Now, what are my thoughts and predictions heading into this race? Well, a lot of people are getting very unhappy and unhyped for this Grand Prix. Mainly because last year was, again, a race to forget, really. It was absolutely dreadful. My personal opinion to all of you guys, give it a chance. You know, when we came to Azerbaijan, for an example, back in 2016, the race was absolutely appalling. It was the same as this one, really. It was unforgettable and it was bad. But the funny thing is Azerbaijan has now been known as an absolute thriller because 2017 was fantastic. 2018 was a thriller. 2019 wasn't that brilliant, to be honest. 2021 was an absolute thriller. 2022 was alright, wasn't like spectacular. It was kind of brought out of light because Leclerc DNF'd. And then 2023 was awful. You know, Baku has had a reputation of being amazing. But the funny thing is it had a really bad opening Grand Prix. Don't judge a Grand Prix based off of one race, okay? You know, the Miami Grand Prix, it was rubbish the first time we've been there, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be rubbish again. Just give it a chance. It might, if it is rubbish again, then it will become one of those circuits which just doesn't give you entertainment, like Monaco, for me, in my opinion, anyway. You know, let's give it time. We may end up having an absolute thriller. I highly doubt it. The reason for that is in terms of the Miami Grand Prix predictions, well, Red Bull, they are absolutely just gone in this championship. They are a second a lap quicker in race trim and can just turn down the power unit quite convincingly after about 17, 18 laps because no one's catching them. So my prediction, Red Bull are going to thump everyone and get another 1-2 finish. Whether it'll be Perez, whether it'll be Verstappen, we're not sure. You know, Perez did a great job this weekend, keeping Max Verstappen in his pocket and not letting him out. Only lets him out to call George Russell a dickhead. Again, that just basically goes back to the weekend itself. Shambolic, sore loser, but it is what it is. Ferrari, Red Bull, Ferrari, Aston Martin, Mercedes. Who do I think is going to be the best out of the three heading into the Miami Grand Prix? I think Aston Martin will probably be the second fastest car. I think Ferrari will probably be next, and then it'll be Mercedes. I think Mercedes, I know they're bringing minor updates to Miami, but obviously their big package comes in the next race in Imola. But the Mercedes is not very good with rear-end grip, and that first sector I think is going to hurt them. I could be wrong, but that's what I personally believe. And then further down the order, I'm not really sure, to be honest. Everyone's very equal in everything. I'm interested to see what McLaren do, because they've obviously brought their new upgrades to their floor and stuff. I think maybe the Miami Grand Prix will give them a better indication of what those upgrades do. Because obviously in Azerbaijan, it's very hard for them because they only had one practice session. They couldn't really learn much, whereas here they'll have everything from Baku a week ago and they can fine-tune it and start to just, you know, gain a bit of extra out of it. So I'll be interested to see what they do. Apart from that, everyone else behind the top four teams is all very close, and I can't quite really see who's going to be quicker and who won't be. But there's one way to find out, and that's tuning in. So that is pretty much it, guys. Like I said, I haven't really talked much about the Azerbaijan Grand Prix itself. It was quite forgettable. My most points that I wanted to get out on the F1 debate this week about the Grand Prix was just the weekend itself, and it wasn't very good. But I've said that many million times now. But this is the F1 debate, and the comment section is there to be utilised. Drop your comments down below. What did you think of the Grand Prix itself? Was there anything that you liked that I disliked, or you disliked that I liked, or whatever? Let me know. And also, if you've got any predictions for Miami, let me know. But for now, guys, I'm out of here. Thank you very much for watching. Drop a like, subscribe if you're new here as well. I'll see you next time. Take care all. Peace.